We will call to order this meeting of the Plan Commission of the Village of North Hudson, June 15th, 2011. Let's start with the roll call.
Terry Felland.
Here.
Rob Howard is absent. Chairman Mike Miser.
Here.
Dan Ortner is absent. Tom Mitchell.
Here.
Jean Schneider is absent. And Mary Wecken.
Here.
We have a quorum. And meeting had been duly noticed, so we're set to go. Welcome to the semi-annual meeting of the Plan Commission. Because of lack of activity, we haven't met since November. And so the first thing we'll talk about is the approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was November 17th. And on there, we had one item of business, was the extraterritorial subdivision, which we referred to whomever.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion's been made, second?
Second.
Okay, motion made and second to approve minutes as written. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes have been approved. The next item is a public hearing. It's a conditional use permit for applicant LT's Automotive, owner Lonnie Smedja, to operate an auto repair shop at 605 6th Street, and that's where the master mechanic was that came before us a few years ago. Do we want to open up to public first, or do we want to just hear a summary of what, anyone have a preference? Well, let's just open up to the public here. I'll ask for a motion to open this hearing to the public.
Make a motion to open the public hearing on the application for conditional use permit.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are in public hearing at 7:04. Is the applicant here?
Yeah.
If you'd like to go to the podium and just, we have your application, if you just want to say it for the folks at home.
Okay, my name is Lonnie Smedja, and it is a corporation, just went into place and everything as of today was signed. It's LT's Automotive Incorporated, and the use permit is at 605 6th Street North, Hudson, and 54016. So we're just kind of waiting for the approval and get the ball rolling.
Okay. And as you saw from the application, you described the business as an auto repair shop. You're asking for business hours of Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, Saturday 9 to 2, with office hours, not working hours, or mechanical hours, but office hours up to 7 o'clock, Monday through Friday and Saturday to 4.
Yes, that's correct.
And you ask for a limit of 10 cars or so to park there. That's about all you can get in there, isn't it?
That's about it, yes.
And I was really pleased to see that you've been talking to the neighbor nearby.
Yes, I have talked to Lynn
Great.
a couple times.
And you're willing to put up a fence if they request that. That's great.
Yes, and they did come out there today and they kind of surveyed it. So we kind of know where the line is.
Okay.
Tight, but yeah, we kind of know.
Okay. Any of the Plan Commission members have any questions?
Public first?
Sure. Anyone from the public would like to speak? Please.
Were you done, Lonnie? Is that it?
Yes, that's it.
We might ask you to come back if there's more questions. But
Hi,
hi.
I'm Lynn Ward, and I live on the north side. And I have spoke to Lonnie, and he and I agreed that we would request that you put in the permit that in the future, if I request it, that he would put a 6-foot privacy fence along his north line from where the existing fence is back. I guess that's all that I have to say.
Are you asking for that now, or are you asking just for that in the future?
I just, yeah, would like it in the permit, so if I need it in the future, I can request it.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, otherwise...
Excuse me.
Yes.
You want it on the 605 property line instead
Right.
of yours?
Between us, it'd be between us, because
Okay.
our buildings are very close together.
Right.
And the permits that existed before this last one, before Marshall Mechanics, they always had that condition in there. The last one didn't, but I've been there, this is the 5th owner. And the 4 before that always had that condition. So I'm not saying yes to do it now, but just in the future, if there's, you know, a lot of noise or whatever, if I request it.
Do you have a vision of where it starts and where it ends on the
There's an
property?
existing fence there. It's kind of like a rail fence. And if he would just start it right where that starts and run it back to the back property line, that would be great, out right along his north line.
I'm not sure what the ordinance is that the fence, if
There
it's
may
a
be height
solid
limit on the
fence,
Front or something.
a solid fence, I think, cannot be any closer to the street than the front of the building.
That would be fine.
Okay, so it might have to
Yeah.
move back just a little bit if it's a solid privacy fence.
Yeah.
I think the other issue is distance from the property line. There'd have to be a
Well,
waiver.
whatever the ordinance is.
10
right.
feet.
I mean,
Fence?
well, it has to be on,
Otherwise, you have to get permission from the property owner to put it any closer than 10 feet to the property line.
That would be doable. We could work on that.
So I hate to put it in there that it just, at your request, a fence would be required when there are these other things to consider.
Well, he'd have to get a permit anyway first, right?
you know,
Correct.
And to get the permit, I would have to sign, because the neighbor behind us just did it. And the neighbors had to sign that it was okay.
Because
So
it was-
at that time, he could bring me that paper and I would sign that we'd put it through. If it's needed.
and it's good to see that the applicant put in his application that he'd be willing to put in that fence, so there's gonna be no problem with there.
And what about a fee for a permit for the fence?
There is a fee for the permit for the fence.
Yeah, what we would do tonight wouldn't change the rules of how you go about
Right.
getting a building permit and how you have to build the fence and all those kinds of rules. Those would all be in place.
If we say applicant to do it, then the applicant pays the fee and the applicant follows the rules. Well, pretty straightforward. Yes,
Do I need to go up there? Or-
better if you do, yes, then everyone can hear you.
Okay,
Thank you.
they did have the surveyors out there, just kind of a preliminary one where the markers were. And I just, before I came in to the meeting at 7 o'clock, I did go back there and everything, and just, so you know, like on the corner of the building, back corner of the building, north side, is where the gas meter is. Well, I stepped it off from from the building to actually, if you eyeball the property line and eyeball it, you guys, you can almost see where it would go. It's max, maybe 2.5 feet on that corner. Okay, but that gas meter sticks out about a 1.5 feet from the building. So there's about a foot in between where you'd have a fence. So if you're saying that, you know, it'd have to be like 10 feet from a building, the fence?
No, it doesn't
No,
have
no.
to be.
Oh, okay.
No.
Go ahead and
You-
explain there.
Okay.
The ordinance states that a fence should be constructed no closer than 10 feet of the property line, adjoining property lines.
Okay, okay.
If you want it less than that, you have to get written approval from the adjoining property owners.
They'd
I
have,
think both parties want that, so that.
yeah, we'd have to put that fence right on the line in that area. And then when I talked to Mary, that at where that fence, where that gas meter would be, there would have to be a gate.
Yeah.
That you could actually, if
I would recommend that.
Yeah, XL Energy came in, they could open up the gate and they have full access to that meter.
And if you didn't suggest that, I'm sure our building inspector would when you say, I want to put a fence here and there's a gas meter in the way, so, yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of really about it, yeah, and the fence, yeah, and whether we go to the full length of the property or connect to her small one, the small one, like the small little fence that she has up there, that is before, or the box is right there, or before the property line. You'd have to actually take a look at it and everything, but that small little picket fence that she has there and everything, it goes back almost to the gas meter.
Well, we don't have to design the fence
No,
tonight,
no,
we just have to
no.
go into
No.
the.
I just wanted to
Yep.
say,
Okay.
That's fine.
But I think before we put a condition that a fence needs to be built, or even, I'm not so sure it's a good idea, just if you request it at a future date, it needs to be put in. I think that
Maybe
it
put a
has
time
been
limit on it.
in a conditional use
Within
permit
6 months.
before. Well, this particular property, there has been a request for a fence to be put in before,
Yeah.
several times. So what happens is, with a conditional use permit, when there are conditions, it is possible that those conditions are not met, and then the property owner is in violation of the conditional use, and the conditional use can be pulled. So I don't think that making it arbitrary, that if I request it at a later date, it needs to be put in. Either we make it a condition that it needs to be put in. I mean, you can give it a time
Yeah, give it
of
a time.
a year, or 6 months, or 2 years, 5 years. But I think a specific time needs to be put
Yes,
in
can't be open-ended.
to
Well, I've
the
been
permit.
there. This is the fifth owner.
Mhm.
3 of those, the first 3 owners when I was there, that's the way it was worded, if requested.
Mhm.
And
You can change that.
Anytime when not. The last one, I couldn't come to meetings, so the fence wasn't brought up. But it's been that way for years and years, that if that, because they're so close, if that fence is requested at a later date, then you deal with it then.
I just think to avoid issues in the future, we need to be as specific as possible with the conditions of the conditional use permit. Because things may change later, so that's why I'm suggesting that if you anticipate at some point wanting a fence there, we should put that in, or consider that as a condition with a specific time frame.
Well, see, it's hard to know because I don't know how much business he's going to build over time.
Yep.
I don't know how much noise there's going to be there over time. I don't know how much traffic there's going to be out front over time, so it takes time.
Here, the other thing is traffic out front. If you're looking for something between the building and the street,
No,
you can't do anything.
no, I'm not doing
I mean, well, nothing can happen anyway.
it. Right.
We can't do it. There's nothing, unless an ordinance
I'm just
changes.
seeing people
No,
getting out of
it's
their
fine.
cars and yelling and walking and going in the front like at a business.
And it'll be easier to clear the snow in that whole blacktopped area if there's no fence there by the road, so that would work out good.
Well,
I guess I would suggest is since she's not asking for a fence, he's willing to do it, let's just put like you say, a 2-year timeline
I
on,
think a
so it's
time
not
limit-
open-ended into the future.
Yes, and I think it may,
Maybe she'll decide she doesn't need, doesn't need the fence there, doesn't want a fence there, and doesn't ask for it, and then it goes away. But anyway, that's something we can talk about. Anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, I would ask, what's wrong with doing it as requested?
Well, as requested, but I don't think it should be hanging there forever. Just all of a sudden, one day,
Everything good, goes good for 2 years and 1 month, and then all of a sudden there's a problem. He doesn't have to put up a fence?
Yeah, I agree.
I don't understand.
Well,
Okay.
they're amicable about it. I
We
mean,
can leave it
they've-
open-ended,
They've
and we can leave it
agreed.
open-ended.
but here's the other problem. You've been there through 5 tenants or owners, and if you're not here to request a fence, it doesn't get in, and then there's a problem.
yeah,
That's because each owner was so different,
yeah.
totally different.
What I'm suggesting is, since you are here, you're requesting it, it has been requested in the past,
Before I ever lived there, it was requested.
then I'm just suggesting that since both of you are amicable to doing it at some point in the future, I think it makes sense for us to put it in there.
Terry's made a point, though. If you put a timeline on it, things are hunky-dory for 2 years and time limit's up, and 1 week after there's some issue, and then they can't get the fence. That's if you put this time limit on it. And they have agreed, they want the time, either one is acceptable to the fence, why not just let it?
Well, right now, no one's
Right.
asking for a fence. They're both willing
Oh.
to do a fence. What would happen if somebody moves out and a new person moves in, and it's February, and say, oh, I'd like a fence put up in the middle of winter. I mean, you don't want to get done, all that kind of stuff.
Wouldn't they have to?
Isn't there another conditional use
No.
permit?
No.
What if
the-
someone moves
residents.
into your residence?
That's what I mean.
Yeah. That has nothing to do with the conditional
Right.
use permit next
That's what I
door.
meant.
Why can't it just be this one?
Because she said the
Yeah,
previous,
why can't you word it this owner?
You could, that would be an option. You could either do, the neighbor has the right, or you could do it, this particular
the
human
current
being has the
occupant.
right.
Okay, if we can do that,
You have that option.
okay, that makes sense to me. Any other comments from the public? If not, I'll call to close the public hearing.
You know, one thing you might
Yep.
want to do is there was a letter
Oh,
that came
thank you.
in. You might want to present that into the record.
Okay. And where is that?
It was in your,
Oh, there it is. We have one letter from a resident saying, to whom it's concerned, I am not in favor of issuing a conditional use permit to operate an auto repair shop at 605 6th Street North because it's a residential neighborhood. So we'll enter that into the record.
Is that, you should read the whole thing, so.
Roger Peterson, 1288 Cratley Lane, and then his phone number. Let's close the public hearing, and then we can talk about the C1 area.
okay, just prior to that, there was one other person who came in, did not leave anything in writing, but that was Dave from Linex, which is the business directly to the south, and he reviewed the application and indicated that he had no problem or no concerns with the application.
So those are the three public comments we've had.
Yes.
Outside of, okay. Okay. Anything else from the public? If not,
Move to close the public hearing?
second?
Aye.
All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
We are closed at 7:18. Sorry about that. Okay, let's bring up the C1 commercial district. In regards to this letter where the gentleman said it was a residential area. It's actually a commercial district.
Zone C1.
It's Zone C1. And from our ordinance 05-2010 that we amended last year, the Central Commercial District C1 is intended to provide zoning for small businesses established in the parts of the village which were developed before July 10th, 1970. And then we went on to say permitted uses are as follow. And remember what permitted uses are. It's the one where they don't have to come and get a conditional use permit. And then there was conditional usage that says other commercial uses similar in nature to the permitted uses, small engine repair shops, all new construction, and then, with that. And remodeling, the remodeling deal was a conditional use. So we didn't specifically mention auto repair shops as a permitted use or a conditional use, but the definition of C1 is small businesses established before July 1970. And I think we all know that some type of auto repair business has been in that place for a very long time. So do you see a problem that our omission that we did not put it in the?
No, I think it's a similar use.
It's a similar use to the ones we have listed. Okay, anyone else have a comment on that?
On that particular thing?
Yeah, on that particular point. Well, it was brought up in the letter, because
Yeah.
he was mentioning it's a residential area, and if you look at our map, it's, North Hudson's a little different. It's residential, then you'll find the little C1 areas where the commercial businesses were for a long time. Okay, Terry, any other comments?
I'd like to ask the intention on signage.
I only have a window one, there's one right now, and when Mary was out there today, I just asked her about the sign, probably right over the peak between the two garage doors, and that was about it, but I have not had anything yet.
We have something on signage?
He would come to the office and talk to you?
Well, actually, he would contact the building inspector,
Yeah.
and the zoning administrator, one and the same person, and he issues sign permits.
We have a sign ordinance, and so you can get a copy of it from Becky, or the building inspector has it, and he issues the permit. So,
You're okay with the sign inside the window as long as it doesn't cover more than 50% of the open window space?
That's an open sign and LP's Automotive, and then the phone number, and that was pretty much about it. And that's
Yeah.
the window sign.
I don't think you need a permit for something inside a window,
as long as it meets the conditions.
as long as it meets the 50%.
So the police can
condition.
see inside and make sure that, for your benefit. Anything else?
10 cars fit pretty well on that lot. Seems to me the last people that were in there, and I could be wrong, but I believe that the outside storage grew beyond what the permit specified.
Well, there wasn't supposed to be any outside storage, I believe, was there?
On vehicles?
Well, vehicles, yeah, but other material.
Terry, you mean out beyond more than 10 cars or something like that?
Yeah.
It
What do you
could be on
mean?
that? Yeah, because he's saying he's not gonna have any outside storage except the 10 cars.
10 to 15 cars overnight. What was it? Width of parking stalls needs to be, if they're 90 degree, need to be 10 feet wide. And across, the back part of the lot is 100 feet. So, I mean, you'd have to do some clearing out back by the back fence. But I think you could get 8 cars back there very easily, and that's just along the back fence.
If you're looking at an ordinance definition of parking stall width, I don't think that would apply in this case. This isn't a
Why
general
not?
public parking a car.
No, I know, but that,
So I don't
so you
think the
could
10 foot
actually
width-
go thinner or less.
Right.
I would think so.
You could
You could
squeeze
go
a few
less.
more cars.
So what
in
I'm
it.
saying is, even if it was public parking, there should be enough room back there. Or using public parking as a basis to determine if
Oh, okay, I
10
see
to
what you're saying.
15 cars could fit, yes, I think they could.
Well, I think the application says 10 cars, and I would have a big problem in stretching that to 15. I think that gets to be toward junkyard.
But you're okay with
Status.
10 as a max?
Yeah, and that's what is on the
His
permit
application.
application.
He said
You
10.
may be referring to the typed possible conditions for
Yeah.
approval. That was,
And basically, I took that somewhat from the previous conditional
previous
use
conditional use
permit, which did allow for 10 to 15 cars to be parked primarily on the south and west side, and no overnight parking on the
West,
east,
east side.
east
East
side.
side. Yeah, okay.
so this page that's possible conditions of approval might be a good starting point for whomever would like to make a motion when we're done discussing.
You want me to
Not
make
like
a
the
motion?
village board, the chair does not make motions, so at least it to one of you three.
Does the fire marshal still have to get into the building?
No, they, go ahead, Lenny, you told me this today.
Oh. Yeah, I just got the letter, was it, yesterday at the house and everything, because they stopped by and we had to do a violation because the fire extinguisher
Yeah, I see that on this.
wasn't up, but we're not even open. But yeah, there's 2 fire extinguishers in there, but they're not hanging on the wall. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, those are actually there'll be more than 1 fire extinguisher inside the building.
But I guess the question is, does he have to get into the building?
I mean, to do another inspection?
Well, he hasn't been in, I don't think.
Right.
He was a drive-by look.
Was it, yeah, drive-by.
Wow.
He did
not a
stop
big
by on the
place.
10th and was
not a
unable
big
to
place.
gain access to the premises at that time. He had indicated in his report, which I copied for you, that was the only concern at that point that he
Okay.
had with what he could see, but that he would be making an additional visit to the property when they were prepared to open for
But he-
business.
And our typical, conditional use permits require compliance with fire codes.
Right.
so
Yeah, and that
you'll
is
have to do
indicated in
that.
here.
Okay. I would assume there would be some amount of flammable materials, but they would be inside the building. Degreasers, gasoline, things like that.
Correct, there'd be in,
Fire containers and all that kind of stuff.
the max that there could be in everything is 150 gallons of oil, used oil, rock oil, refineries, they would be picking up. No gasoline storage. And I think that'd be about, there'd be some, cases of oil,
Yeah.
but, max of everything, max of any one time would be 150 gallons, 355-gallon barrels. And everything's sealed. Oil filters are sealed, covered, rights are sealed, so flammables and really limited.
And the used oil containers would be inside the building?
Yes, they are north, east corner.
And Kevin, from the engineer, see your engineer's letter, it's pretty straightforward for you.
Yep, recommending approval is nothing in regards to engineering issues.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have a motion for approval?
On What, the conditions
The
that were
conditional-
temporary
the
outlined?
Conditional use permit?
With what conditions?
And then, well, and
conditions?
then you name your conditions.
A couple we've talked about so far, I mean, some of these are, as it's been all along, and you haven't even talked about any of them, so you should probably talk about the ones you haven't talked about, but 6 says 10 to 15, and I'm hearing at least some people think it should just be limited to 10. And 8, I think you need to, I mean,
Expand
it's
on
up to
the
the
privacy
person
fence.
making the motion, but, you know, somebody
You need
wants
to
to add
express
that
how
part
that-
about how
yeah.
that's gonna work, yeah.
I guess from what I've heard everyone said is, as requested, if requested by the current occupant of the house to the north, everyone seemed
want
to be
it-
happy with that.
Do you want the condition to be paid by the
Yeah.
owner occupant of 605?
Of the applicant of the LT's Automotive.
Right,
Yeah.
Which is 605.
which
Yeah,
is
I'm sorry, I
605.
didn't quite hear that, okay.
Yep.
Should we have a description of the height
Of the
and
type of
material and
I
stuff
think
that
we
it's gonna be,
should,
should
don't
be
you?
made of?
Isn't that in the fence ordinances, or?
Well, you could
Well-
have different types of fence, if you're talking solid fence, I mean, that's,
Solid fence, chain link fence, or
Well, it says a privacy
Privacy
fence.
fence.
Privacy
I think
fence,
that's-
yeah.
the chain
that's pretty
link
good,
wouldn't-
because it has to meet the ordinance.
okay.
A
So,
chain link
you know, it
wood,
can't be
I
scrap wood or anything.
think, a chain link would, I think, if it had the strips in it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's very aesthetically pleasing in, yeah.
Is this to be limited to the current property owner, or just to the property owner of 60,
9.
whatever?
My
609?
personal view is just looking at both sides, is to the current property owner, because I just worry what happens with somebody, if something changes and then all of a sudden you're, we don't usually require people to put in fences unless there's a reason for it. And he's willing to do it, and she's willing not to have it done now, so it's,
Okay,
So
it gets to be a
if,
nuisance, we have other ordinances to take care of nuisances.
all right.
so if requested by current property owner of 609 6th Street North,
Is that your address, 609, yeah? Any other issues with any of those other conditions? Anybody have any other comments on them?
I'd like, yeah, number 4, no more than 2 vehicles advertised for sale shall be parked on the premises within a calendar year.
That's our ordinance.
That's according to
that's
what.
our
So-
ordinance.
Okay.
We have,
Since it's not a car lot, is that
Right.
what it is?
so it's like anybody else, you get 2 a year.
Okay. Well, I'm ready. Make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for LT's Automotive, 605 6th Street North. And I would like to get by saying as specified, as conditions specified in 1 through 8,
With the following changes.
with the change on item number 6 to read max, or limited to 10 vehicles, overnight parking, and the privacy fence to be changed to installed along the north side of the building if requested by the current property owner of 609 6th Street North.
Very good. Do we have a second on that?
I second.
We have a motion made and a second. Do we have any further discussion? If not, all in favor of approval of the conditional use permit for LT Automotive at, I gotta find it here, 605 6th Avenue North, with the conditions as read by Terry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It has been approved. We will send it to the village board. Thank you very much.
That would be tomorrow after, sometime potentially after 6 PM, when the village board will also take this item up.
But you're closed at 5.
Actually, Kenny, no.
Can have office hours till 7.
Yeah, you can't.
Between whatever time and 7 o'clock, you can have some office hours.
Good luck.
Good luck with your business. And thank you, ma'am, for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda Number 5, ordinance 03-2011, amending chapter 86 subdivision. Article 2, licenses, Article 4, design standards, section 86-137 of the village code regarding the collection of fees in lieu of parklands. Patrick has something for us.
What had happened is, in the past, state statutes allowed communities to charge fees in lieu of parkland dedication. And I think in 2006, they removed that. And shortly after that, they put it back. So a lot of communities removed it from their ordinance, which the village did. And,
We did.
Following state law.
Because that's what we do.
Yes, of course.
now most communities have put it back in.
Hallelujah.
And so what Gloria asked me to do was take a look at your original ordinance and see how the fees were charged or calculated. And what I said was I would provide some other communities that we've worked with and to see how what the village had compares to other communities. And then I on the salmon colored sheet, we'll go through that last, I actually take a portion of a community that's not here. Did I not hand that one out?
Yeah, I don't have a salmon.
This
We'd
one must be
noticed that
salmon.
one.
He's got
Oh,
Sorry about that.
I thought this was the salmon here in the heading.
salmon haven't run yet.
Actually, I provide an example of
Farm fish salmon.
an area within an existing community and show how the various subdivision ordinances would play out.
Wow.
So you can kind of compare how yours would be. So then
Location, 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 huh, Patrick?
Yeah, so everyone's different. So let me just talk briefly about the three things I handed out. The first sheet that has the brown border across the top. What I said was I would look through the various ordinances, and usually there's, a few main things that communities focus on. And in this case, I have the minimum parkland that has to be dedicated. The second column shows fees in lieu of land. The third column shows land that would not be accepted as parkland. And then the fourth one is frontage requirements. So how much frontage you need typically of parkland on a street. So that varies quite a bit. And so a lot of communities have gone back and looked at these after the period of rapid development that a lot of communities have gone through in western Wisconsin, and then they started evaluating the parkland that they had received and kind of decided to maybe update their ordinances a little bit. So just briefly, for the communities and under these four headings, so the village's original ordinance, there was not a minimum parkland dedication that I could see within the ordinance. Fees in lieu of land were $25,000 per acre of land less than the total required. So let's say in a subdivision there were 4 acres of land, parkland dedicated, or that's supposed to be dedicated, and they only want to dedicate 3. Well, there's one less land of parkland, and they would be charged a fee of $25,000 for that 1 acre. And you can divide it up by a fraction also. So if it was a half acre less, then it would be $12,500. Okay. What was considered not acceptable land, there was nothing in the ordinance about that. And frontage requirements, there were none stated, though it just said that they had to be sufficient and adequate. Okay. Now, if we look at the village of Woodville, the dedication is at least 2 acres, and then it says it should say in no case less than 1. And what the condition is there is if there's not a lot of good land to be used for parkland, and if they could find 1 acre that may be adjacent to other undeveloped land that would be sufficient for parkland in the future, they could expand upon it with the next subdivision, that would be acceptable. In Woodville, the fee in lieu of land was $400 per residential unit. So fourplex would be 4 residential units, single-family home would be 1 residential unit. Land that's not acceptable, and I think it's common in the remaining communities, basically drainage ways, wetlands, or areas reserved for streets shall not be considered as satisfying land dedication requirements. And I think a lot of communities will find that a lot of land that's dedicated as parkland ends up being ravines and ditches and such, and not real usable. And then frontage. They said a recreation site shall have a total frontage on 1 or more streets of at least 200 feet, and no other dimension on the site shall be less than 200 feet. Roughly 200 by 200 is an acre. Okay. So they want 200 feet on a street. Okay, for Menominee, they want their minimum is at least 2 acres. Again, their calculation is a little different for fees in lieu of land. So if it's single family, 2 family, 3 family, 4 family, it would be $400 per lot. Mm-hmm. So a fourplex on a lot would be charged $400, where in Woodville, it would be charged $1,600 because it was per dwelling unit. So it's a little different there. Anything over 5 or more residential units then was charged $100 per unit. So a little different there. Same thing, drainage ways, wetlands, street right-of-ways does not count as parkland dedication. And there they require a lot frontage of 80 feet. And nothing, no other dimension under 200.
One column that you don't list is how much land to dedicate. You have a minimum, but not how much.
Yep.
A lot of them have like a 10%.
Yep, and we'll talk about that.
Okay.
I actually have that laid out. I didn't want to put too much
Oh, that's
information
fine,
in
that's
here.
fine. And then one last question.
Yes.
We're talking major subdivisions here? That's where this applies? Are you going to talk about that?
Typically.
Okay.
Some communities, it could be a minor too.
Okay.
So, but I would say 3 out of 4, it's for a major subdivision.
Yeah.
And then on the backside, we have Somerset. So in general, they have to have at least 1 acre. And they have 2 categories. If a developer will donate land, but does not want to do the improvements, then it's $500 per residential unit in that subdivision. And if they do not want to donate land, then it's $750 per residential unit. So it's a little variance there, depending on what situation. Typically, in all cases, it's up to the community to decide which option fits them best. Same thing, drainage ways, wetlands, right-of-ways, not considered acceptable for parkland dedication. And here, a recreation site should have a total frontage of at least 33 feet. And that is because one thing they looked at were the little strips of green spaces between subdivisions that were dedicated for perhaps a walking trail. Mm. Well, they started looking at these strips of land that they received, and most people in those neighborhoods did not want a trail put through there. And so, for example, if it's a multi-purpose trail, it should be 10 feet wide. And so a lot of times these strips are 15 feet. So they're very close to the lots. A lot of people will say that they don't necessarily like to see people walking in their backyard. So the solution was, if you're going to have some sort of path or trail designed in a subdivision, basically a half a right-of-way would give you plenty of space to put the trail in, maybe plant trees, do something, add some sort of buffer. So it just, the adjacent residential units would not feel like it's right on their lot or on their property. So just creating a little breathing space. And then basically it says the minimum required lot frontages shall be increased if the proposed park will have a larger service area. So from a tot lot to a neighborhood park, to a community park, to a regional park, as the service area grows, you should probably have a larger street frontage, but it doesn't specify. Okay. So those were some of the four main things that we compared within communities. Now on the other white sheet I handed out, these were some of the details that, Mike, you were bringing up as far as how these things are calculated. So for North Hudson, I think it should be pointed out that in any of the residential categories of zoning, it's required 1 acre per 25 proposed or potential residential units. Okay. If it's anything commercial or industrial, it should be 5% of the net land, excluding lands dedicated to the public use of streets, schools, public buildings. So there it's a percentage. Nothing for W, which I believe would be conservancy. Okay.
Now 1 acre per 25 units, is that small compared to what the other ones you just gave us examples?
It actually matches Somerset's.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
because they all use different units.
Well, that's just it. That's just it. And then hopefully the salmon sheet later will kind of show how these all play out on the same piece of property.
Good.
And then in your PDD district, the dedication is going to be based on the use of each piece of land within it. So if some is multifamily, some is single family, some is maybe commercial, it's going to be based on that. It's kind of a combination of things. Okay. The next section I thought was unique, and to me it may be a bit confusing. So it talks about calculating the potential residential units for a property. So perhaps it can be interpreted a couple ways. I'm thinking there are maybe lots laid out that aren't built on. So the example is there's a lot that's it's zoned RS and contains 26,000 square feet. But if nothing is on that lot, it could be split in half and 2 other lots created. So actually the potential would be 2 units instead of 1. Okay. This is the only place I've seen that, and to me it complicates things a little bit, but it may work. But you have to look at the potential growth of an area too. And just as just an idea, it may be easier to have some wording that if additional lots are created, they would be charged a fee. That might be the simplest way to state that sentiment.
Because we'll see that. Somebody will want to come in and say, I've got this big lot, I want to cut it in half.
Right. So they were assessed
and all of a sudden, what do we do with parkland?
Exactly.
It's too late, and you know.
So they were assessed 1 fee on
Yes.
that lot. Now there's an additional lot, so perhaps that new lot would be charged a fee.
Yeah.
And then I just thought I would note that in your original ordinance, fees were charged for commercial and industrial development. I see about 50-50 in communities so far. For Woodville, this is kind of broken up differently too. For their land requirement, it's 5% of total acreage intended for the use of commercial or for commercial or industrial uses. 10% for single and 2 family dwelling units, and 15% of the total acreage intended for multifamily. So what you do is have to calculate those 3 different areas, and you would get the total area that would have to be dedicated. Okay. Again, if you have below that, then if you have a subdivision that has multiple uses, multifamily and residential, then there's a slightly different calculation. Fees in lieu of land, you can do a percentage, so it can be broken down as, let's say, in your subdivision, you're supposed to dedicate 4 acres. You can dedicate the 4 acres, or you can dedicate 3 acres and then 25% of the potential fees. And so as you adjust the amount of land that you donate, you can also adjust the fee that you would have to pay. Okay. And Woodville also charges fees for commercial and industrial development. Okay. Menominee. So there specifically says any land by subdivision, minor subdivision, or the creation of a residential planned unit development. So that's where you see the word minor subdivision. I think it's the only area I see it. And in their case, it's 10% of the gross area of all the property. Okay. Again, they have the fees in lieu of land that adjust by the percentage of the total that's required. So if you can donate 100% or you can donate 50%, but then you have to pay a certain percentage of fees to make up for that. Okay. Menominee does not charge for commercial or industrial. And then finally in Somerset, they also do not charge for commercial and industrial. And theirs is 1 acre for each 75 potential dwelling units. And again, if it's a combination, then you look at those differently and look at, see what they would be individually and then add them together. So everybody does it a little different, using a little different method. So what actually may be a little more telling, actually I was wrong, Mike. You said is the village's requirement of 1 per 25 dwelling units.
Yeah.
High, and I said no, but Somerset's was 1 per 75, so it's probably the higher of them, but a lot of them require a minimum 2 acres. So finally, hopefully this will put these things in perspective. On the back side of this, I just took an area of a subdivision from a community, and so basically these on top, you can see there's lots that have 3-4 unit dwellings on them, and then below it's another lot with 3-4 unit dwellings, and then the rest of the lots within the subdivision are single family. So I thought, let's say this is a subdivision that's proposed and they don't want parkland, and so what would the fees be based on the various ordinances? So just a little background quickly for that piece of property, because everybody calculates their requirements differently. The gross area was just under 27 acres. The area specifically for the multifamily was about 3.3 acres. The area specifically for single family was about 16.3, and the remaining land was road right away, and there is a stormwater pond on that property. There are 24 multifamily units, and there are 51 single family units. Okay, so how does that play out? According to your original ordinance, they would be required to donate 3 acres of parkland because there's a total of 75 units. Now, if they did not want to donate those 3 acres, or if you say we don't need 3 acres of parkland, we would require the fees instead, the fees would equal $75,000 because it's 25 per acre less of what's required. Okay. Now in Woodville, the required parkland would be 2.1 acres, and that's based on the square footage. And their fees are based on $400 per dwelling unit. So the fees in that case would be $30,000 that they would collect. Menominee is 2.7 acres because it's 10% of the gross area of the subdivision. The fees are $400 per lot, not per unit, per lot, and in that case it would be $21,200 they would receive. And for Somerset, the minimum is 1 acre per 75 units, and that's what the subdivision is. And the fees would be $750 per unit, and being 75, the total fees would be $56,250. So you can see how these different items play out. So when you compare them, you actually have more parkland required, and you would collect the most fees compared to the other communities as they're laid out right
Did you
now.
also say, based on history in North Hudson, do we collect more fees and less land because there's less land? Menomony's big, Woodville's big,
Right,
so they have land.
right.
What do we get here? Do we usually get a fee as opposed to land?
I'm not sure how your past subdivisions have gone, though it seems like every subdivision has a park in it.
There's, we use the last one, and then it's on
Sorry. You see that very well. This shows all the parkland within the village, in the comprehensive plan and park plan.
And so it shows the newer subdivisions that are north and to the east were parkland.
Yes, they have parkland in them. Now, some of them are more like open spaces,
Yeah.
and some of them are actually developed parkland or an open space that you could use.
But it's either developed or undeveloped parkland.
Correct.
Is the development of those parklands based on the amount of lots sold? Is that how, or is there a time frame when those developments have to be completed and those parklands?
I'm not sure about yours. A lot of them say, so for example, 3 years now, a lot of them say if the community does not develop those parklands within 3 years, the land would go back to the developer. But some communities will stipulate that the developer is responsible for the land and the development of it.
Can I comment on that, Patrick? I
Sure.
would say that a lot of that question gets handled often in a developer's agreement, and we would put in, these are the requirements for the public improvements. If you're gonna build that subdivision, you put the roads in, and you do it by such and such a date, and you put the streetlights in, if you're gonna have streetlights by such and such a date, and you build that park, and the volleyball net better be up by such and such a date. So we'd put that stuff in to the developer's agreement itself.
Yeah.
And we do it
That's a
that
good
way
point.
because the village has a better idea of what we want, if we want this particular land developed or undeveloped.
Yeah, I
Sometimes you want an open
suppose, yeah,
space and you don't
yeah.
want a playground or a top
Yeah.
lot or whatever you said.
Correct.
Okay.
One of the cracks we got into on the Derrick thing, and I don't remember the time frame. It would take 4 years. There was a dollar amount specified in 4 years or whatever it was later. That was the same dollar amount that was available to buy equipment or develop the site, whatever it was. So the village lost. We negotiated for X dollars, and if you factor in inflation and the prices of that park equipment, we came out behind.
Something to keep in mind with the developers' agreements.
Patrick, you mentioned where we are at the high end of that, and I haven't looked at all of these. Woodville, for example, when parklands are dedicated to the village, properly graded, subdivider is required to properly grade and contour, provide surface contour for anticipated use, cover areas with 4 inches of topsoil, seed,
Yep.
whatever. So, and I don't know that we,
I don't believe
Do
you
that.
have that in yours, and that's common in the sense where we'll dedicate the land and we're gonna use it for a play area or maybe a ball field down the road, or have an open space so they can practice soccer, but we need to grade it and fairly level. So that's where that comes in. Now, if you have an interesting piece of land with some nice topography and you just want a trail around it, then you would, of course, request that grading. But like Terry pointed out, well, a lot of that stuff gets worked out and is specified in the developer's agreement.
So what you're saying, both of you are saying is you really want to know, the village really wants to know up front how we would want to use the parkland. And maybe there'd be input from the park board and all that.
Yes, exactly, because I think now that you have a park plan, you would look at the various other
Yeah.
parks in the area, and you may find that they're, for example, up here, or it may be anything adjacent that may be annexed or added. If they all have easy access to their park,
Yeah.
there may not be a need for any parkland, but the fees will help maintain the parks and, et cetera. And so if you have one developed park here, maybe within this area, you're looking at more open space.
I noticed Somerset also has standards for the dedicated land, and I don't know about the other two.
They have one?
Standards for the dedicated land, graded and topsoil.
Yes.
and-
Either they all did or half of them did, but
Yeah,
it's common.
I didn't.
Yeah. And typically what we've seen, like Somerset's is an acre, a minimum of an acre, but when we looked at all their new subdivisions, the parks that were developed by the developers were much larger. So even though they only required an acre, if they required a park, typically the subdivider was adding a nice park, of a decent size. And they become selling points, is what we found. Now, this is something else that we didn't touch on, but also when the park goes in. Now, you can specify a certain amount of time. Towards the end, they were specifying that it should be done with the development of the subdivision, not later. So as the subdivision is being built, put in the park, they also found that the lots in those areas sold faster.
If you're gonna bring a scraper in to level the ground, you might as well level the park at the same time,
Yeah,
wouldn't you?
exactly. Yeah, probably much easier. And then there's no disruption when people are living there.
Right.
But I could see where it'd be more attraction, knowing that that park's there, not knowing when it may be there.
Yeah, yes, exactly, exactly.
It seems to me those questions started coming from the residents out in the Derrick property too.
Yeah, and that has really been slow developing there.
Yeah.
It's, you know.
So at this point, it was more just kind of show you what you had and how that compares to other communities in the area and see how that plays out with an example subdivision. And, to kind of digest all this and then see what we want to do with incorporating any or none of this information back into the ordinance.
When you specify the North Hudson original ordinance, you mean the existing ordinance as
No,
it
no.
sits, since it's been fixed up, or
The original one when you had fees in lieu
you
of
had
land.
fees? And then
Yeah.
the existing ordinance does not have
We
fees.
do not have
Correct.
such an
Okay, that's what I
ordinance at this
couldn't
time.
follow with.
Okay.
I didn't know which one was which. I didn't go online to
Yeah.
look.
And then the thought was, well, what we had, was it good?
Yeah, I saw version 1, version 2.
Was it adequate? And so that's why we compared it to others and then put together the little subdivision comparison.
The history.
One of the things I didn't like in the old ordinance was the specified dollar figure. $25,000 per acre. I
Sure.
didn't think that was appropriate. You know, it might be too high, it might be too low, depending on the circumstances.
Just the way it's written, it seems high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still the highest, but it's somewhat comparable to.
It's not as high when you see it like this.
Right. The highest we've typically seen in the area has been 750 per dwelling unit, which was Somerset's, which was the closest to the 25,000 per acre.
You know, I think there's one legal principle here you have to consider too, which is just that when you charge somebody a fee, there has to be some reasonable basis behind it. You can't just pull a number out of your hat. So there's gotta be some need for parkland or something like that, or this number has to come from somewhere. I think that's also part of what we were after from Cedar, is to give us kind of an analysis of that. Not exactly maybe like you would have to go through a full-fledged thing with an impact fee ordinance, but at least to have some sense of how much money do we need anyway, if we start trying to charge people.
Sure.
And does this last column on the salmon sheet help us, that it shows that we're in the ballpark with these other areas, so it's reasonable and customary or
I
whatever?
think so, although it also shows we're
a little
higher
high,
than
yeah,
anybody else,
yeah.
yeah.
No,
But I think land's more expensive in North
It
Hudson.
gives us
is-
some good comparisons, yeah.
But we're in the ballpark.
I mean, that's very true, because, yeah, as you head over toward Woodville and Menominee, the land prices drop
Yes.
dramatically.
Yeah.
So it shows it's reasonable.
And some of it may, also, you know, this I didn't check on, but budgets for Parks Department that they can use for maintenance. Now, in your Parks plan, you actually list recommendations for new equipment or improvements in all the parks. So to me, that justifies the need for the money, because there has to be maintenance. And they've looked at upgrades, so instead of maybe a new park, the fees are more appropriate to help offset those costs or pay for those.
Well, isn't that kind of where that number came from? Because that seems to be the park board budget for parks and maintenance over the past
Maybe.
10 years or so anyway.
I think there was a reference
It
to
seems
it in
like a number that I've seen quite a bit over the last couple of years.
Right.
I think I believe in the comprehensive plan in the chapter for parks, there's a reference to the budget.
Yeah,
And
that's where I saw it.
I believe
There is,
it
they
was
say
maybe
currently 10 to
50
15,000,
Yeah.
with 5,000 contributed by the board annually.
Okay, so the rest
You
may
got
have come
20.
from the fees and.
Well, those fees go into a separate kitty.
Yes, it has to be only for park-related expenses.
It's development and it's not maintenance.
Yes.
So it
That way
essentially
yours
has,
is-
All specifically for development.
There's a theory like that, Terry, in impact fees, but this isn't exactly an impact fee. So I don't think we're held to that in this particular,
but I think that's the way the park board budget goes.
oh, well, perhaps, right. That may be the way they have that.
This, versus this being a dedicated account.
Because the budget is,
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it works with impact
there's
fees.
a maintenance piece of it and there's a development. And whenever they want to put in a
Gloria
new
would know
teeter
all about
totter, it
this.
comes out of the development fund. When they want to replace an old teeter totter, comes out of the maintenance,
Okay.
as I recall.
On the map there on the south, on the lake, the hatched green line says potential park location. Remember, we talked about that. Now, that would be something where they could take some of these fees from some development on the north side and purchase that land. Is that,
You could probably do it for purchasing of parkland. Also, I think this piece would have been, I know we've talked about it in the past, eligible for DNR stewardship
Yeah.
grant,
I think
which is a
that's,
50/50.
Which, no, that's not village land right now, is it?
No.
No,
No.
but it's kind of a forest with a big,
it's a
Did or big-
Burnley land, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
That's-
and
that's Burnley land.
that's been conveyed since that map
Oh,
has
has
been
it?
put together.
yeah.
Well, that's
That's
right,
the
because he
one-
broke it up in
Oh,
a couple
and
lots, then one big
the owner
lot.
died, and then it got
Right.
split as part of the
But there's
estate.
still a big lot there.
There is, yeah.
Yeah.
So when we were doing the comprehensive plan, that was kind of an idea for
Yes.
that parcel. Okay. So I guess at this point, these are just things to consider. And what we would like to see in the ordinance as we change it back and allow fees to be collected
Okay.
in lieu of land.
But now we have a much better I know I do, I have a much
Yeah.
better understanding on what we're trying to accomplish
Yeah.
here.
This should probably get to the park board too, shouldn't it?
It may come up in our next topic of dealing with what we should be doing with the comprehensive plan, because I think something like that is there. It was on one of our action lists. Remember? Right?
Yeah.
That was on there. Okay, so then, time-wise, is there a time period here? It's just, we cannot collect fees until we change the ordinance.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if you want to come back and discuss it and have a discussion, we can figure out some of the main points we want to add, then we can look at revising the ordinance.
And that would start with plan. We would have some ideas of what we would like.
Correct.
I think that's appropriate,
I
yeah.
would
Yes, I would
still like
think
to
so.
know what state statute that is, to
Okay.
be able to find it.
I can email that to you, Mary. What's your
Yeah.
email address?
M. Wecken, W-E-K-K-I-N, at
Uh,
Comcast.
Patrick,
Yes.
did
Comcast.
did the in lieu of go because of changes to the statute or court
Yes.
decision?
I'll send you that tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't know if a court decision changed the statute. The statute changed.
For whatever reason, yeah.
For whatever
Now
reason.
the statute has changed back.
Right, it didn't last very long, maybe a couple of years, and then it went right back.
It was a good idea that, maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, it was an absolutely senseless idea, in my opinion. So I hate to disagree with you.
No, that was,
And you know, as long as I'm on that, there's another one that bothers me, and this is the,
just so you know, I was kidding with the
Yeah,
first
I know
one.
you were.
Okay.
but there is another one that bothers me, and that's the effort that we went through on the court decision on the zoning and permitted usage. It is my opinion now that we probably went too far with that, because while I support the property rights, that took so much control out of local government on what happened within our boundaries that I wish we had specified about 2 permitted usage, and rather than develop the list, because it really troubles me. I know what happened in this village when things were opened up years ago when Jones Chemical was around. And that was open and things happened and it took forever, so.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney. I think we should talk about that sometime and get it on the agenda.
That's
And
exactly.
talk
what I
about
should
it, and that is something that we can look at, is changing the ordinance.
I don't know if any,
But think about it. or
if
get the
there's more
ideas across.
support to talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
And if we have specific examples, that would really help.
And part of the problem, Terry, is that you can't be talking too much about things that aren't on the agenda.
No, I understand that.
But it's a good point,
I
and
understand that.
develop what your ideas are, and we'll get it on the agenda next time we have a meeting or so, and we can talk about it. Is there any other,
Let's talk to the planning commission chair about that.
yes, or you?
Talk to Ben.
Is there any other discussion on item 5 on the ordinance? If not, thank you, Patrick, don't go away.
Nope,
Yeah, thank you.
Item 6, the annual comprehensive plan review, discussion and possible update. As Patrick knows, comprehensive plan was put together back in 2006, it was
Yep.
adopted. Several of us went to a comprehensive planning session up in, where, I don't know,
New Richmond.
New Richmond, thank you. And so we said, it's a good time to look at that again and see our annual update. We tried it once and we didn't do very good on that, so we're looking again. Everybody was forewarned to look at it. Becky sent us some, that action item list. Before we get to that, why don't you tell us what you've come up with for
well,
discussion tonight?
I think the main thing was to look at the section that's called Implementation Priorities and Schedule.
And we have a copy of that in our book.
Yes, and I believe it was, maybe was given to you in a packet also, if that's what you're referring to. Okay, sorry. And what that was each chapter had what were called goals, objectives, and policies at the end of them. And the policies or actions, I can't remember the exact wording, were the things you could do within the village to achieve the goals related to each chapter. And so at the end, what we said was, look at these policies or actions and see if there's ones we would like to start addressing. And that's where this list came up. And we put them in a category of short-term, mid-term, and long-term. And so, again, the goal of this is to, once you have a plan, not just set it aside, but hey, these are things we see as a priority. Let's start working on them as a community. We'll go back, review. Now, because they're in this list does not mean, for example, if you haven't achieved the short-term priorities, you've done something wrong. What it is trying to point you in a direction and have you use your comprehensive plan. So what I did was I started looking through these, and actually, I think for a community, you've probably discussed or addressed a number of these.
And as I, just interrupt you,
Sure.
as I went through it, there were some where, gee, I don't know if we did that. The park board would have done that, and it didn't come to the plan commission,
Yeah.
so I don't know where we are on that. So are you gonna kind of tell us where we are, or give us a
Well,
quick update, or?
yeah, I won't evaluate how you're
No,
doing.
no, no,
But
just the status?
from what I know,
Yes,
Correct. And, you know, and some of these,
Grade on whether he's done.
Hey, I've got notes.
you know, the interesting thing is, some of these you look at them and they may be
November of last
related
year.
to development. And our plan was adopted in 2006, and basically the following year is when everything dropped off.
Yeah.
So maybe what was important in 2006, there, you know, it hasn't even come before you since then. You know, subdivision-related issues and things. So, the first one for short-term said amend the subdivision ordinance to require the preservation of existing trees and planting new trees. I'm not aware of that being updated at all. Okay. And that was in referring to subdivisions. That's why that came up. Second one, create ordinance banning phosphorus-based fertilizers. Okay, the state has done that for.
I just went on their website today, and they have DNR, NR 102, 217, 151. They were just adopted, but I really couldn't tell. Everything seemed commercial or effluent standards or whatever, and I really couldn't tell how it applied to the village.
Well, I think it's.
You know what I mean? It's
But
not
Ju-
like they're not selling phosphate soap anymore. I mean, I didn't see anything like that.
I think it was. I'll have to look at the specifics, but it's more like lawn fertilizers
Oh, okay.
and things like that. Nothing ag related, I believe.
Okay, so this is kind of, the state has kind of done
Right, and
this.
I think in this case, there may have been, like they talk about windmills right now. There's too many communities with too many different things going on, so they feel it's best that the state creates a standard and an ordinance. So there is something out there. At the time, there wasn't.
What's out there? I got lost.
I think this is an example where communities were having their own specific ordinances, and they were so different from each other that it was decided perhaps the state should have an ordinance. And you can, of course, be more stringent.
And what did the state do? I mean, relative to lawn fertilizers?
I believe there's no phosphorus allowed. So if you have someone come and take care of your lawn, I believe there's no phosphorus anymore in any of that.
How about if I go to Menards and there's phosphorus up there, I'll tell you.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I can find
See, that was
specifics
what
on
I was
that.
getting at too, when I tried to read these three, or whatever they're called for the DNR,
Yeah.
is I couldn't see if it get down to that level.
Okay.
Of the phosphorus, but, you know, they were.
So probably in that,
DPS permits and, you know.
in that
outfall
case,
things.
a licensed commercial applicator
Yeah,
can't use it. That's what I'm hearing?
that's what I got out of it, that it didn't come down to the homeowner or whatever.
I'll go back and look.
We don't
'cause
have
I'm
our own
curious now.
sewage system, so, you know, it doesn't apply here,
Right.
so.
Create recommendations, guidelines for landscaping, parking, and architecture that would apply to the village center or other development of the village. We talked about, like building design standards, and I believe that went through the
And the
plan
board,
commission.
and the board didn't want that at that time.
Yep. So it was addressed. And
Yes.
again, because they weren't successful, doesn't mean
Right.
this plan didn't work.
No, we looked at it.
We looked at it, and it wasn't the time. On the next page, and I'm just looking at the short term, looking at the Chicago, St. Paul, the old railroad car shop historic district, to determine if there are unique architectural details that could be used to establish aesthetic guidelines. I don't know if we looked at it specifically when we looked at the community character guidelines.
Well, that's where they talk about the potential group now too, where they talk about preservation committees and things, is we as a plan commission didn't propose an ordinance on anything like
Right.
that,
But used as aesthetic guidelines for what purpose? Residential, commercial?
It's commercial.
well, this one, particular one is commercial industrial.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was specific. I'd have to go back to the
No,
chapter.
I mean,
it
this is
references.
just saying to look at it. You know, pretty much to take, are there any architectural details? It sounded like to me this was any unique characteristics that could be used elsewhere as aesthetic guidelines.
Yes, but I don't know if it's for residential. It could have been future commercial development.
Yeah. That's how I remember it is.
Yeah.
Just to see if there was
Seemed to be one.
Something
that thought we
unique that
should
could be
preserve
carried
something
through
down there.
within
Yeah.
the community.
Like muds and suds.
Incinerator, we opted for the burn down.
Yeah.
Amend the village code to require a pedestrian bicycle plan for new subdivisions and redevelopment. I believe that hasn't been done. Continue to use the village website, newsletters, surveys, et cetera, to provide access to information for village residents. I know you still have the website up.
And I checked it today, and it's very current. I mean, there's lots of information on there. Zoning map is on there, for instance, and our ordinance, you have a link to that, and the minutes are up to date.
One thing that's missing, though, is a fee schedule.
Oh. And the village also has, on communications, Patrick, the village got the telephone system, so if something comes up, they make the call and it rings all the phones in the village.
Oh, yes, yes.
So that's
Yeah.
pretty neat.
Yeah. And the other one was explore the possibility and pursue a stewardship grant, which I believe was probably for this property down here.
Now, let's use that for an example. If we were to do that, where does that begin? Now, does that begin here? Does that begin with the park board? How does something like this happen?
That's a good point. I think it should either, ultimately, it should come from the board to say we should do this.
The village board?
But yes, but I believe anyone could propose it to the board. You know, so for example, the Parks Department could say, we would like to look in the possibility of applying for a stewardship grant for that piece of property. That would go to the board, and the board would give them the go-ahead to do that.
And now, using that as an example, we as a plan commission looking over this, I know when we've talked about it in the past, about reviewing this, we really should be reviewing it with the other boards, because it impacts them. And we
Well,
talked
you
about-
certainly could, yes.
And if some of us are members of the other boards, that's great, but if not, then, we should meet with them or let them know you should be.
Have them look at the sections that are pertinent to them.
I don't think anything's been done there. I know the park board has put effort into looking at the railroad property, but I'm quite sure they've never done anything about looking at that Burnley property.
So those were the short term. Just midterm, briefly, some of those, use a guide to area parks and create better signage. I believe that. I don't know if anything related to signage has been done.
Most of the signs in the parks have been updated.
Okay. Update the park plan, that's been done.
March 08 on the website, park plan.
Yeah, possibly.
Well, that's what I saw
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
Yep, I believe that's what it says on the
Smart, I
cover.
just happened to look at it today.
Oh, okay. You can have to say.
Work with land preservation organizations to prevent undeveloped land, to protect, I'm sorry. Review village ordinances and suggest amendments that would make them consistent with the community design standards, which we looked at but did not pass. Put up signs to identify the village at the entrance points on the north and southern ends. That was something that came up in discussion. Update the 1986 Comprehensive Surface Water Management Plan. I don't believe anything was done there.
Kevin, would that be something you guys would be working on if it was requested?
Yeah.
That hasn't been,
Didn't they do some work on?
I thought I heard something
The
about
Lake
surface.
Malibu end at some point?
I think that's still in the works.
Okay.
Yeah. 'Cause I know there's some board members that are going to those convenings.
And I believe that may have been a thought, that it's probably be more of an area
Yeah.
plan,
Yeah.
not just
That's
village
kind of-
specific.
I think that's kind of being addressed at the county level. There's a stakeholders group that's involved in looking at the health of the lake and some of the
Mhm.
runoff that's coming in from the Willow River.
Work with appropriate state agencies to survey the trees. A lot of communities are doing tree surveys. Specifically now because of the emerald ash borer. They want to see how many they have.
We have foresters, don't we?
We do, yeah. And I think at this point, they've determined, at least relating to the emerald ash borer, that there have been no confirmed emerald ash borer cases in the village.
Is the closest St. Paul? I don't know if there's been any closer.
I don't think so. It's just St. Paul area.
Create a lake management plan, and again, that's probably more of a
Area.
multi-jurisdictional effort, not specifically for the village, but, you know, I think you could interpret it as if an organization is going to do it, you perhaps want to look at participating in. Create a bicycle pedestrian plan to assist in area and regional planning.
Now,
And
That's
actually,
come up. Is there
there's a
talk?
countywide plan, and the village was part of that.
And,
The village was part of that.
okay. So it's ongoing.
Yes, it's
Or-
ongoing. It's probably like any park plan. They typically try to update it every 5 years. Yeah. And then continue to work with surrounding agencies and appropriate organizations on crisis planning. I don't know if the county has been updating theirs, but typically I
That would
think
be
you
like
have a
an emergency
representative.
management plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have that. It's
I remember
continuously
somebody
being
came to a
updated.
village board meeting and talked about that from the county.
Yeah.
So those are the things that were looked at that probably are within the time span of since it was adopted to, let's see what the final year was,
Just
2011, at
continuous.
the end of this year.
Yeah,
So I think you actually looked at many of them,
quite a few.
yeah.
On
And
the next
again,
page, there's the continuous ones. The very last item was
that are always ongoing.
reduce the amount of sand applied to the streets. I noticed there was a lot less sand. Did they basically
Yeah, they did, but
Wasn't
why?
it
salt, I
state
think?
I
it
couldn't
said.
believe it
Yeah.
when they changed from sand to salt.
Well, that
Yeah.
was part of it. It was, everyone said there was too much sand on the road.
Yeah, we don't use sand at all anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah, and now the rivers are a mess with salt buildup. I couldn't believe it when they
I
made that
thought
change.
the state mandated that change, or the DNR did by rules.
No, I don't think so.
you know, would they care about particulates versus salt?
It's between the two of them, there's, obviously pros and cons to it.
But salt's getting to be a big
Did they use
issue
regular
now.
salt or was it the special stuff? It looked like it was colored. Like I thought maybe it wasn't sodium chloride, it was something else, but I don't know.
I
It's
don't know.
road salt, but I
Oh.
don't know, I don't know the
I was gonna
specifics of
stand,
it.
but he's not.
I can't see where salt would be better in any case than sand.
They use a lot of sand in Baldwin, I know that. Every winter.
So in general, for tonight, it was just to look at, take a look at those implementation priorities. I did note that when I was looking at the parkland dedication portion of it, I looked at the park portion of this, and probably everything is outdated, because it talks about not being able to collect fees in lieu of land, and it talks about the park plan being updated. So, perhaps since it's gonna be basically 5 years, you're supposed to have a major revision of your comprehensive plan in every 10 years. But perhaps this is something where maybe the Plan Commission would want to start looking at the individual chapters. Now, one thing is, with the census data coming out, we can update some tables, but very few. And when this was created, a lot of the information came from past census, 1990, 2000 census you could use to kind of look at trends. Well, the 2010, did I say 2010? 1990. The 2010 census did not ask the extent of questions.
Really?
Yeah, the only ones that have come out so far are population, the distribution of population by age and sex, the number of households, on the average person per household, and then the amount of owner-occupied houses and housing and renter-occupied housing. None of the other tables that we've created, the questions were not asked. So I'm curious to see how communities will address those things, because basically you can't continue and see the trends changing.
I'm surprised. I got the short form, but at the time it was, the long form is so onerous, we'll never get it done. And yet you say wasn't as comprehensive as the previous
Right.
one.
I don't know if there was a long form.
Yep.
I think what people got, that shorter form, was what everybody got.
No?
So the number of, the types of questions weren't asked.
I think they had a select number of long forms that they sent out, so there was some percentage, like maybe 5% of people got the long form, and 95 got the short form.
I'd have to double check, because I know what they're doing is some of the urbanized areas. They're doing more sampling like that, and you can find statistics for the county or an urban area, but not a specific community.
Who here was on the planning effort? Mike, you were here?
I was.
Tom? Gene, probably? Gene
Patrick.
was.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, I know
Gene
Patrick
yeah,
was here.
Gene was.
Daryl was the chair at the time. Mary Beth, Taya, Mike, Tom, Paul Rhodey. Gene was here, Scott Snyder, and it says Jim Dickman, former. I can't remember. Was he there at the very beginning, or was he? Maybe he was there when the process
He was on the
started?
plan commission and he moved out of town.
Okay. Okay.
I don't remember him, so I might have come in his place.
Maybe you did.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't exactly sure what we were gonna do other than review it, and I knew you were coming and talk about that.
Well, I think
I just
that-
looked at to see what was that, from my point of view and from each of our points of view, if there was something somebody saw, just like we did with the last one with the community, or with the commercial standards.
Yep.
If there was something we thought we'd wanna tackle ourselves, or something we think we should do. I don't know.
And I think within the plan, that's basically, it's worded that every year you would take a look at it,
Right.
see if there's things you've done. Now, because it's not on that list,
Right,
but it might be in the plan,
Yeah.
doesn't mean,
yeah, there's more
Can't
than
do
this.
it.
Right.
sure. But it's just kind of take a look at the things that you looked at doing as a community and whether there's some that you should continue to pursue. Now, if you have any plans of changing, updating, or amending the plan, you have to go through the full public hearing process.
Yeah.
So
But
I
we
guess
might-
at this point, we're just saying, look at it and see what you propose to do, and see if there's anything you'd like to pursue.
And any of the members that are on park boards and things, that if you want to just bring that up and say, is there anything you would like plan commission or those particular boards to look at, let us know, and maybe we'll have an action item.
And also, since it's by the end of the year, it'll be 5 years old, I think you should start looking at the idea of a full review of it.
Yeah.
Just see if there's certain sections that need to be, you don't have to update the whole plan, but there might be several sections that need a major revision. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah,
Any
you're
other
welcome.
questions, comments?
Okay, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
The next item is routine business. If you would like to bring up Dan.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a really long time ago now, but in April, we had an election. Dan Ortner, who is a member of the Planning Commission, was elected to the village board. There was some conversation at that time as to whether or not Dan would remain on the Plan Commission, and he is going to remain on the Plan Commission, and that is allowable by our ordinance to have a Plan Commission member also be a member of the village board. So he will be serving in both capacities at this time.
I think that's an excellent idea, and I've felt that that should be the case for some time.
Good.
Is there any other business? Is there anything else we're going to do on new business? I think that was it.
Yeah, I don't have too much
If
else.
not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Anyone?
I motion that we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor of adjournment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 8:31.